Welcome to the GSD Factor podcast with your host, Misha Blameyer-Farish.
On today's episode of the GSD Factor podcast, I am honored to have Yesi calling in here from Nashville. Hi, Yesi. How are you?
Good. Good morning. It's great to be on your show, Misha.
Thank you so much. Yesi, share with our listeners a little bit about your story and what you do.
Yes, well, thank you. So my name is Yesi, and my story is a very interesting sort of non-linear career path trajectory that starts in higher education, takes me through biotechnology, health sciences, consulting, and then back to higher education, with the through line being innovation and empowerment.
Yesi, share with our listeners what you are doing today at the Wond'ry at Vanderbilt.
Yeah, I am so lucky to be where I am today. So I have found myself in the most amazing role at the Wond'ry, which is the Innovation Center for Vanderbilt University. And what we do here is we help university affiliated participants. So that's students, staff, faculty, and alumni of Vanderbilt University and of any greater Nashville universities take their ideas from the very beginning of ideation all the way through implementation in whatever form that looks like, so that we can increase the innovation capacity for what we call our innovation ecosystem. And my role here at the Innovation Center is to be Director of Strategic Engagement and Ecosystem Development. So my job is to connect people and organizations to each other and to other members of this ecosystem so that we can do more amazing things for more humans within our ecosystem.
Amazing. And that's how we met. We met at the Girls in Tech conference here in Nashville. And I'm so honored to be actually one of the Wond'ry mentors and working alongside the other mentors and your teams and just helping these students and different groups walk through those processes of ideation and builder and helping these founders. And I think that as we continue to be intentional about taking the time to help and support and wrap around them, I think we're going to continue to do great things and see great things, and how amazing for them to stand on our shoulders.
Absolutely. And one of the things that we've built here that's really important for me as a person and as a professional, and you know this, Misha, which is one of the reasons that it was so amazing to meet you and to bring you on board, is a couple of our tenets for what we do. One being inclusive innovation, right? Which is, we think that innovation is any value add change that's implemented to improve the human experience. And the key words there are any value add change and human experience. So not just some people, but all people. And the other tenet, which is really important, which I think you have in spades, is radical candor. We talked a lot about that. The importance of separating the human from the idea. Humans are always valid. Ideas, not always, right? And so it's very important for us to, when we think about innovation, we think about whoever's having the idea is always, always, always a valid individual. The ideas, however, have to go through a scientific process of validation or invalidation. And we do that through discovery, and that's okay. But if we don't separate those two and we get them confused, that's where we do humans a disservice.
So this is a get stuff done episode because we want our students, both the Vanderbilt students and the larger community students, to be able to listen in. But what we're going to focus on today, Yesi, is we recently had the honor of having the Renaissance Women's Summit here in Nashville, put on by the Renaissance Marketing Group. And the Wond'ry is the location sponsor for that. And you had a panel. And I really wanted our listeners, both students and adults alike, to hear about this amazing panel that you curated and moderated. So let's dive in and share with our listeners, talk about who was on your panel and what did you guys dive into, and help us lean into that conversation again.
Of course. And thank you for bringing this up, Misha, because it really has something to do with those two tenets I just talked about, inclusive innovation and radical candor. So this was the Renaissance Women's Summit. It's a summit all about women empowerment and women's basically coming into their own, filling their space, and really reaching for more than they've ever reached for before. But one of the things that's important for all humans to understand is that you can fill your space, claim your space without displacing anyone else. And so we put a twist on this and had a men's panel at the summit. And at first, I'm sure some eyebrows went up, right? Like, why are you having a men's panel at a women's summit? Because it's really important, because we share the world with all people, right? All humans. And so what we did was we curated a panel in which we covered 3 different, very male identities, right? Very sort of male empowered identities. We had a movie star, an actor. We had a corporate leader, and we had a famous athlete and an American football athlete. And so we took these 3 gentlemen who are amazing, and I'll go into who they were. So our male athlete was famous NFL Super Bowl champion Michael Oher, who everyone has heard about and has potentially even seen the movie The Blind Side. And what we've come to discover in the last 2 years is that the movie is not true. And we understand now how the movie was made without his permission. He wasn't involved in the storyline. And we have found out that his true history was twisted so that that family could write a better story and make money off the movie. He never saw a dime. And when we understand his story, we realize that all humans suffer moments of disempowerment and displacement. And so we get to understand his position as a human, as a man, and we get to understand that when we come together with our biggest allies in men, women and men, when they find equality, the world gets better. And his biggest champions are women. His wife, Tiffany, and then he tells us about his story. And then he tells us something beautiful, which is what he's doing about his life and his true story, which is his Oher Foundation, and how he's going now to fix the gaps that he saw as a young man, and fixing that educational gap, and fixing the mentorship gap that he saw as a young man, so that this never happens to anyone else. And the first 2 students that he is putting through his foundation are young women. And that story is amazing. And we need to hear that. And so he was on our panel. And I think that that's just we needed to hear that. We needed to see that. We need to see that allies are super important to our women's journey, so that we understand that as we empower ourselves, we're not displacing a man in the role. We're joining hands with whoever else is in the room to do greater things together. And when a man is a true ally, he will behave like us, right? Because the idea of equality is that we're going to find the best candidate for a role, and then we're going to hire them, whether they are male or female. And so I wanted to show that example of Michael. So that's one of our guests.
Amazing. And I think what's so powerful in that is, and how it ties into the GSD factor life, right? Is you touch on confidence and you touch on resilience. And now look at the influence that he's making to make that change. And I think for you and I, we have spouses that are extremely supportive and extremely empowering and lift us up. How do we do that as a larger community of bringing together and saying, we can do so much more together?
Exactly. And part of that message too is the message for men and for women. Like, your space is your space. You filling it fully never infringes on someone else's space. And that's a beautiful thing, right? We have to talk about that. My other guest, my corporate guest, was really important because it was so funny. And I even touched on that in the panel, that he was a little nervous. He was a lot nervous because he said, I'm not famous. There's an actor and there's an NFL Super Bowl champion. I don't know. And I said, because you're famous in your own circle. More importantly, he leads a team of 1,500 employees all over the world. But the way he runs his shop and the company that he works in is female forward. They get their bonuses based on how close to a 50-50 percentage they can get to female, male, or this gender neutral environment, and that they really truly hire the best candidates, but always knowing that they have to be female forward. And the fact that they have programs like the one in India that he talked about, that's called the BIG program, Back in the Game. So basically in India, which is a country not known for female forward empowerment, they and just to give our listeners a little bit of a feel, the company that Esteban, and I forgot to say his name, I'm sorry, Esteban Mezquiriz. So his company is called Globant. They are all about technology. And one of the technologies they brought forward that some of our listeners may know, they're a big company that nobody knows they know. And if you've ever been to any of the Disney properties anywhere in the world, and you ever wore that magic band that was the one that got you into your fast passes and that you just scanned to get in, they designed and developed those bands. And so they're all about technology. Technology, for the most part, hasn't been female forward in the past, and we're going to change that. But anyway, so think about India, not known for its female forward culture, not known for having technology and female forward culture in the workplace. Their company has the BIG program, Back in the Game. So what that means is, as they strive to hire 50% women into their technology jobs, which is, whoa, so amazing, they have very female forward maternity leave packages for these women in tech. And then they have a program to help the women come back to their jobs after having their children and get them back in the game. And so when you learned about what Esteban was doing, you could see from a corporate perspective, a job perspective in technology, that there are people out there, and in Esteban's case, a man, a father, a husband, who had it really, really etched into his spirit. I need to be an ally, because when I help women take up their own space, the world is better. And he's literally doing it in other countries, not just the US. And that's amazing. And this is the kind of ally that we need to say, hey, I want to take up my space. You take up your space, Esteban, because when you fill your space, I can fill up my space, and we link arms. We're going to change things. We're going to get stuff done.
So true. And I love Esteban's story and what he is doing to truly change women in tech on a global scale. And it really speaks to our be imaginative attribute, because when we think outside the box and say, let's do something that's not been done before, let's be that imaginative, let's ask those questions, let's be curious. Just because something hasn't been done before doesn't mean we can't do it. And they dreamed big from the technology perspective, because those bands were so innovative and trailblazing in and of itself. But now that they've applied that to women in tech, bringing moms back into the workplace, it truly is remarkable. And they're influencing, not just within the United States, but they're also influencing on a global scale. All right. Last but not least, talk about your last guest.
Yes. So my last guest was Jason Wahler, and he is a famous TV actor. He's a host, he's an advocate, he's a philanthropist. So most people know him from TV shows like MTV's Laguna Beach, The Hills. He was a celebrity rap superstar. And then he also did the show The Hills, New Beginnings. But what's really important about Jason is, so most people remember him from the shows, and he's tall, dark, and handsome, and everyone thinks, ooh, superstar. But what Jason has done is really step forward to talk about his addiction and his problems with rehab. And he's become an advocate for really talking about the truth behind addiction and the fact that addiction is a disease. We have now, as a society, studied addiction and known that it is genetic, that it is a disease, and that people with addictive disorder suffer greatly. And he has come to terms with his disease and has really dedicated his life now to understanding it, to dealing with it, to treatment programs, and then to really sharing his story and trying to help as many people as possible. And he talks about trying to really sort of be the face of addiction and being very vulnerable and tearing down this facade of the very masculine energy of the robust masculine movie star, right? That comes in and swigs whiskey or takes down a drink, or it's okay for men to drink. It's okay for men to swig down a beer, and it's okay for men to get drunk because that's what men do. And it's okay for men to not be responsible for their behaviors when they're drunk. And he's tearing all that down and saying it is not okay for you to behave however you want when you're drunk. And it's okay to identify that you have a disease, and it's okay to get treatment, and you should get treatment. And he was so vulnerable on stage, and he just opened up and showed us, like, deep down the hurt. And he went from this larger than life tall actor, and I don't know, Misha, if you felt the same. He became this small young man, like he almost became childlike in the chair. And all I saw was almost like a young boy on stage sharing with us how he must feel inside when he faces everything he was, everything he did, what he put his wife through, what he put his family through. He has children, and what he has to face with this disease, and how he behaved when he was under the influence of all of those chemicals. And here is another facet of how we as women have to understand that sometimes people who aren't our allies are really men who've been struck by this toxic masculinity and are trying to put on this face of, I have to be Uberman, or I'm not really a man. And we have to help them too. And other men can help us help them and get through that, so they can realize that that's not healthy for them either. And so that was a really important point, I think, too.
It was. And what struck me about the conversation too was how present he was with everyone. Like, he was large room, large audience, but he was so present with everyone and so transparent and so vulnerable, which also needs a certain degree of confidence, right? Mm-hmm. To be able to say, okay, this is a safe space, and this is, and sharing the story. But it really struck me how present he was with us, and just being very open about the struggles that he had experienced, and the gratitude for those that have surrounded him. But I also was struck by the action he is wanting to take now, and really wanting to be intentional and be action forward and be influential in helping individuals find the right treatments. And, he's had so many experiences. And so for those that are ready to make that change in their life, what is that step for them? And so, Yesi, you pulled together and curated this beautiful panel. The message that everybody walked away with was, we can find those allies in those men in our world. And I think it was such a beautiful conversation to have at the Women's Summit. So thank you for that. What I would love to hear from you now is, when you are out in the world doing all these amazing things, whether it's with the Wond'ry or your Nashville community or your greater community, what's something you want to leave with our listeners today?
So there's two things, because it's tied to my 2024 mission. The last question I asked that panel was very intentional, and the only people who knew it were the people on the panel. And that is what we as women could do when working with allies, make things better for ourselves. And unanimously, those men said, for us women to come into the room and be ourselves and to lead as women. And that was really important for everyone to hear. So often women come into the room and think that they need to lead as a man or lead in a way that we think the room wants us to lead, or come in and try to be more than we are because we think that garners some special respect, or we try to change ourselves to fit the room. And those men said it very clearly. I mean, it was almost immediate, like it was a gut response. I don't know if you remember, Misha, but Esteban looked up and Michael looked up and Jason looked up. They're like, no, be yourself, be yourself. We love you. And in fact, it was Esteban, I think, who said, women have this amazing talent, better than men, to walk in and solve problems. And that's what I was trying to pull out of them. And I promise you it wasn't coached, because I refused to hear their answers before that panel. But I told them to be ready for that question. And that's part of my 2024. My mission this year is to empower as many women as possible to walk in the room as themselves and solve problems. Don't be anybody else. Don't fake it. Don't try to fit the room. Be yourself, roll up your sleeves, and solve the problems. Because we women solve problems like nobody else.
And we get stuff done.
Absolutely.
All right.
Do.
What is Yesi's powerfully choosing in 2024?
Yesi's powerfully choosing in 2024 is I will be choosing to put my health first.
You and me both, sister.
I tend to overcommit a little bit, but I will put my health first and any woman who needs me second.
I love it. Awesome. Yesi, how can people get in touch with you if they want to just learn more about you? We're going to share, of course, all of your links and information and your TED Talk, which is amazing, by the way.
Thank you.
But what is the best way for people to connect with you if they just want to connect with you as an amazing person that you are, but also maybe they want to learn about the Wond'ry or learn about other opportunities here in the Nashville area?
So the best way is through LinkedIn. That shows you all my connections. It shows you everything about the work that I do. And I do respond to LinkedIn. I am happy to admit that I'm a LinkedIn junkie. So please go ahead and reach out on LinkedIn and get in touch with me.
Amazing. Yesi, thank you so much for being on the show today. And thank you to our listeners and to our student listeners. We hope that you've enjoyed this special Get Stuff Done podcast today. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Misha, for having me.
Thanks for listening to the GSD Factor podcast. If you liked this episode, please rate and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform, where you can also find previous episodes. Let's also connect on LinkedIn and Instagram. If you're looking for more information on the GSD Factor, visit us at gsdfactor.com. And always remember to GSD.